Trend lately has been that my customers are looking at me to help them with ways to reduce emissions. The best way that I can as a hauler help my municipality or my municipal customers or even my industrial customers reduce their emissions, it's by me reducing the amount of fuel I use. What kind of tools do I use in order to reduce fuel? Because for me, from a maintenance perspective, fuel, tires, and my preventative maintenance are the three largest components that I have to focus on to manage my fleet.
In the contract bids, the municipal fleets could always say, hey, we have sustainability metrics that we need to hit, and the way we're going to hit them is making sure the guys who bid on our contracts they're being very sustainable. Well, that puts the pressure on new forms of fuel. There's different types of vehicle types like EVs, waste haulers. How's that being deployed, and who's incurring that cost? And then you have even the discussion of, we talked about carbon credits and buying those on the market to try to potentially offset these requirements for sustainability. And if you can make it work in terms of the price, then it still satisfies.
Yeah, and that's a big part of our life. Our larger customers are municipalities, and they're all aligned. A way to decrease emissions for us, it means either finding a new fuel source. So you could retrofit your trucks at your own expense, start using compressed natural gas. You could buy new trucks, get into electric vehicles. We're talking about $1 million a truck. It's twice the price of what we currently have. And we're not even certain that we can use that technology yet because of where we operate and how cold it is. And we know that it's coming, and we're going to have to address it one way or the other. And so sometimes that keeps you up at night.
Yeah, you buy $1 million truck. Where do you park it and where do you charge it? And I was like, who's got the infrastructure to do that? Is somebody going to go and actually build a charging infrastructure for this? And you better have a whole fleet of trucks that can, reduce that on over the life of the investment for the charging perspective. Some of the early adopters are going to take the hit, and sometimes it won't work out. In terms of EV, I agree with you. I think it's coming.
How can I provide better pricing and be more competitive in an RFP scenario? Or if I'm doing hand-to-hand combat out on the streets, trying to sell one at a time, 6-yard bins, in a commercial space. Well, we were almost afraid of technology back in the day, and we were tracking everything on. It started with clipboards and pens and paper, and we graduated to spreadsheets, and then we've slowly adopted all kinds of new technologies, but it's all about very specific data that you're trying to collect. So when we look at how we use Revvo as an example, we're looking at our tire use. We're trying to decrease the amount of money that we spend on the purchase of new tires, so extending the life of those tires, and having your pressure monitors on our vehicles. I want to be competitive on an RFP for a municipality and speak to the fact that it's bringing our safety up. Why is it doing that? Well, because I can monitor tire pressures. There are all kinds of things that can happen with, the wrong tire pressure, blowouts and thermal events and so on and so forth. But you can roll trucks over and people can get hurt. So it helps us from a safety perspective. The pure cost of tires for us are between $500 and $9 a tire, and you can go through a lot of tires. So having the right pressure can extend tire life. Knowing how and when to rotate your tires, again, extends tire life. And ultimately, too, the largest expense and savings that we are able to control using tire pressure, fuel consumption. If I run the right pressures on my tires, I can create higher fuel efficiency or lower cost or lower fuel consumption. That ultimately, from a cost input, if I understand what's going on and I know how much it costs me per hour to run my vehicles, I can then be more competitive when I go into a competitive bid process.
most of the folks in that room were not the biggest billion-dollar haulers out there. They're local, regional. They're trying to compete. They don't own a dump or a transfer station. They're just running trucks and trying to operate their fleet efficiently. And one of the common threads from those conversations I had were leveraging data now. It's necessary to have some efficiency and some edge that you can compete against with the big boys, because if you can't, you'll always get underbid and you'll never be able to win a contract because you're always getting sold underneath. So by taking advantage of the information that you're getting from your fleet, operations, maintenance, tire consumption, how many dollars does it cost to run per mile for each of these assets, or uptime for hours. If you can figure out how to optimize that by deciphering through that data, then you can have a lower cost, which means you can pass that cost savings through to your customer, which means your bid gets lower, like you said, and then you have a shot. I had a guy from on the outskirts of Oklahoma, and he said, I've been running this business for 40 years, and my dad ran it, and I took it over. And the big change we've done is we were tracking data on a clipboard and paper, just constantly writing it down. And now we've been deploying more software to manage this for us, capturing data on how many times did this truck come in for maintenance? And then throw some predictive alert that says, hey, this truck is coming in way too often. If you can catch it in the moment, you can correct it and not impact your margins for maintenance. Because once you earn that contract, like you said, that's a fixed amount of money you're going to make. So now you know how much you're making. If you can reduce your costs or at least keep it consistent, then you can confirm, you can bank that margin. But the second this thing starts to creep up and your bottom starts to come up and maintenance cost goes up, your trucks get overhauled, you flip the truck, you got to buy a new one. Those things just start to creep up on your margin on a 5-year contract, and all of a sudden you're not making any money. So this guy in Oklahoma was like, that's what we do now. We monitor this thing using our operations, using software and predictive analytics so that we can get ahead of those issues. I had another guy opening up his own routes in the outskirts of Georgia, and he's competing against one of the big billion-dollar companies that we were talking about. They own the dump. And so they're coming into this small town. And so all the constituents are like, well, we'd rather pay our money into somebody who lives here, is local. And so that's his foot in the door right now. He's like, hey, I'm starting. I know I'm going to have to pay a premium to go dump back to this guy, this company that owns the dump, and they're trying to outbid me for this town. But the town is willing to give me the contract because I'm local, because I'm here. And so his point was, I got to figure out how to run this efficiently. He's hiring his dad as the driver. His wife's doing the back office. He's going to hire a couple of drivers. I'm doing this. So I got to figure out, where am I spending my money and how do I make this as automated as possible from the maintenance standpoint, and catching all the issues that happen. Seeing the transition mentally of folks thinking about, oh, it's nice to have this type of solution. Oh, only the big guys can do this. Like, they're the ones investing the resources and the dollars to have these types of programs and platforms, and to now saying, hey, not only do we need it to compete, now we're very specific about what features and what insights and what do we need to do with it. So they're picking and choosing the platforms to actually deploy and use. And it's not the big guys, it's the ones that they're competing against, the smaller operators who are looking at finding an edge when it comes to contracting and bidding and overall controlling the cost of maintaining these assets. Because $500,000 asset, you don't want to have to buy another one. So you want to see if you can maintain it as long as possible and keep it in good order.
I would like to just mention one more time about how we utilize actual Revvo technology and how that can give you a bit of peace of mind. So I touched on how it's important for us to have a good safety record. We drive really big trucks. We had one flip over. So an operator was going around a corner, the truck flipped over. and we're talking about a very heavy and expensive piece of equipment. So you're out a lot of money, lives could have been lost. Fortunately, that wasn't the case. And so we were able to use technology again to try and figure out, post accident, what caused that, because the learnings from that help you guide practices in the future. In this particular case, we were able to use our GPS technology to tell how fast the truck was going and the exact moment when it laid over on its side. So that was a critical piece of information. Then we went to the Revvo technology and looked at our tire pressures, and we saw leading up to that critical moment, tire pressure was good, tire pressure was good, tire pressure was good, and then tire pressure was zero. So it was turned out to be a thermal event. A tire overheated, tire blew, and all at the wrong particular time. When all the pressure is on the right-hand side of our vehicle, we have a blowout and the truck flips on its side. So, the takeaway from that is, you can then investigate further on what to do with tires in particular. But the flip side of that is we could eliminate that this was driver error. You have somebody this is their life. They drive, and if they flip a big truck, and it's because of driver error, that can ruin a career, so to speak. So it gives you peace of mind that you can determine these things. And in our case, it was eliminate the driver error, now point to mechanical and investigate more and get better on that side of things. So I just wanted to mention how valuable this type of technology and this Revvo technology in particular are not vertically integrated. So I go to my competitors' disposal facilities and I pay them. So I'm at the mercy of their pricing. There are some circumstances where I can compete straight up on a operational basis because a municipality actually owns the disposal facility. So now I'm running head to head against them when I compete. It's just who's more efficient. And I can compete on that basis all day long. There are behaviors that you can control using data in real time. So when we use any type of GPS tracking software, we're using that to help train and inform our drivers and correct behavior. If you look at a truck on any given day, if you're aware of when they're accelerating too fast, braking too hard, turning corners too quickly, speeding in certain areas, then you'd probably have a case to be made that your fuel efficiency isn't where it's supposed to be. But now with that data, we can go sit down with the driver and say, hey, this is how this translates, and this is what we need you to do. So those technologies become really important in extending the life of your assets. So that was something we otherwise wouldn't have had. There was a time we didn't have any type of GPS tracking. So in a municipal setting, we may get accused of, hey, you didn't pick up my bin and I had it out front of my house. And I can use all the technologies that we have on a truck now. It's a big, smelly garbage truck, but it's got cameras in the cab, front-facing cameras, cameras in the hopper, GPS tracking. I've got pads and screens that route and send the trucks where they need to go. I can tell a customer, I was there and I didn't pick it up because your car was blocking it, and I can show them the picture of their car. The technology, it now is so pervasive, and you have to have it because you run the risk. In some cases, there's liability associated where you may need it to prove your case, or you quite often need it to just get paid because you actually did do the work. It's super helpful. We didn't have that advantage. So that alone makes us more competitive on the day-to-day.
We talked about having cameras in the bins themselves, so if they were full or not.
There's a few different aspects to that. But if you're in the commercial business and you're picking up, say, 6 and 8 yard waste bins and recycling bins behind businesses, the model is now you want a set schedule of service. I'm going to service your bin once a week on Wednesday or twice a week or whatever the case may be. And I'm going to go and pick it up and dump it regardless of how much waste is in there. In the end, if I have to dispose of that waste, it's to my benefit if I have less of it, because I'm going to have less tonnage, and therefore I'm paying less for disposal. So tipping air, as it were, if I show up on a Wednesday and you don't have anything in there, it's not bad for a hauler because you were there, you did what you said you were going to do, but you're actually not really tipping much or disposing of much. What if every single bin had a sensor and I could have a contract that would give a customer comfort that, hey, look, I'm never going to be tipping air and I will never tip it unless it's 80% full or greater. And then using the AI as a plugin to then have dynamic routing. So, at nighttime, the bin sensors do their things and you have a new route for your driver every single morning and you're able to respond to that in real time. So if done correctly, there is a world where that could benefit both the service provider and the customer.
I think that's probably where technology is going to help maybe disrupt some of the standard business models, and may introduce ways for the smaller, more nimble haulers to compete. The way to disrupt that in every industry is to introduce a technology that allows for differentiation and disruption for operators. And if you can introduce a platform or technology that helps reduce the cost, improve the experience for the business owner who's eventually, or the individual who's paying for a pickup, it's the haulers that can adapt and say, hey, yeah, I'll sign up for that business model, or I can make that work, and I can be nimble, and I can get that contract for you. I think the technology will help the smaller compete and fight back in some ways from this consolidation that we're seeing in this space.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The first great leap in use of technology was using technology to assist rather than a pen and paper, and going with tablets for our drivers to use to do their pre-trip and their post-trip inspections of the vehicle. And I think the hardest thing in almost every case is there's a resistance to new technology just inherent in human beings. The change management aspect was something that we had to think through. So in this particular case, you have a set order of things that you do to inspect your truck before the driver goes out and drives it. So the way we did that, we actually created the exact order that we wanted on a paper sheet. Check it off, check it off, check it off. This was brand new to them at that time, but we built a habit. And then we just introduced a tablet where now you're just going to push this little button instead of writing something. And everybody went, oh, okay, that's not so bad. So, planning the implementation is important, and then tracking the actual adoption as you go and making sure that people have fully adopted that technology. I'll give you a relevant example, in working with Revvo. That was a new technology for us. We installed it on 9 different units, and we knew what we wanted to find from the data that we were collecting. But Revvo had a couple different ways for us to utilize their sensor technology for purposes of the tire. They have a tire patch technology, and then they have a clamp technology. And we had to figure out which one worked. So again, sometimes technology and the adoption of it, you have to have some patience around that. So that means it's iterative. You're going to try it and figure out what works best for you. Our experience with Revvo was great because they worked directly with our maintenance teams, and they were very willing to help with that, the install and monitoring and getting it right. So you have to have a plan before you actually pick that technology. Hey, I want to decrease fuel consumption. I want to increase safety, or I want to have more uptime and reliability for my fleet overall. You have to have a goal in mind. Then you can go out and check out what potential technologies are available to you. And hopefully you can find a good vendor like Revvo was, where you can work with them and get it right as you go through the process. And the success story with Revvo was we've already seen some of those outcomes play out. We're starting to see that our tire costs have gone down, fuel economy has gone up, and we're now going to install throughout more of our fleet. So that's a success story for us. I actually looked around the marketplace. I had come back from overseas and was doing something entirely different with my life at that time. And I was looking to invest or buy a business in Alberta that was oil and gas service related. It's really an amazing business. It's one of the few things, like Sunjay was talking to, from a valuation perspective, and it has all the traits of what people would look for in a tech business. But it's very, very complex. Like, you learn something all the time. There's the logistics aspect of this business. There's the maintenance aspect of this business, the actual technical aspects around where and how you dispose of different types of waste. And as we talked about, what we need to do now to reduce emissions on, a broader scale. Last but not least, as you build a company, we've always treated it like a family business. We feed families. We've got 160 families that we feed, and we take that very seriously, right? So, being in this business it's been a real treat, and it's been a learning curve. Again, going from a dumb company from technology standpoint and learning about technology all the way, it's been a real interesting ride, so to speak.